The billionaire's last delivery. The bullet shattered the penthouse window at exactly 11:47 p.m., missing Marcus Sterling's head by 3 inches. But it wasn't the assassination attempt that made his blood run cold, it was the delivery girl standing frozen in his doorway, holding a bag of Italian takeout, her face pale as death. Because Marcus recognized her instantly. She was the woman from the photograph his dying mother had pressed into his hands 30 years ago, whispering, "Find her. She holds the truth about your father's murder." But that was impossible. That woman would be in her 50s now. This girl couldn't be older than 25, yet she was identical, down to the small crescent-shaped birthmark visible on her collarbone. "Get down!" Marcus roared, tackling her to the marble floor as another shot rang out, sending crystal shards exploding across his $50 million living room. The takeout scattered everywhere, pasta, marinara sauce, breadsticks rolling across Italian marble that had never seen anything more chaotic than a wine spill. He covered her body with his own, his heart pounding not from fear of death, but from the impossible question burning in his mind: who was this woman, and why did she wear the face of a ghost? The girl beneath him trembled, her doe eyes wide with terror, yet she didn't scream. Instead, she whispered something that stopped his heart entirely: "They found me. I knew they would eventually." She knew. This wasn't coincidence. This clumsy delivery girl who'd just spilled Alfredo across his $30,000 rug knew exactly why someone wanted them both dead. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, his legendary composure cracking for the first time in 3 decades. Before she could answer, his security team burst through the door, securing the penthouse with military precision. The shooter was gone, vanished into the Manhattan night. But the questions remained, multiplying like shadows at dusk. Her name was Emma Collins, and according to his background check, completed within 15 minutes by his team of former CIA analysts, she was nobody. An orphan raised in foster care across 3 different states, working 3 jobs to put herself through night school at NYU, living in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn with 2 roommates and a cat named Biscuit. Nothing remarkable. Nothing threatening. Nothing that explained why she possessed the face of a woman who'd been dead for 30 years, or why professional assassins had tracked her to his door. "I'm not telling you anything," she said defiantly, sitting on his leather couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her red delivery uniform still splattered with sauce. Despite her circumstances, nearly killed, currently being interrogated by one of the most powerful men in the world, she met his gaze without flinching. "You can't make me." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. He'd built a $40 billion empire through sheer ruthlessness. He'd destroyed competitors, survived corporate warfare, and earned his reputation as the Heartless Billionaire through countless acts of calculated cruelty. People twice her age cowered before him. But this delivery girl with sauce stains on her shirt was staring him down like he was an inconvenience rather than a threat. "I can make your life very difficult," he said, his voice dropping to the dangerous register that made executives tremble. "More difficult than it already is." She laughed bitterly. "I work 60 hours a week and still can't afford health insurance. I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years. Last month, I had to choose between groceries and textbooks. So please, Mr. Sterling, tell me exactly how you plan to make things worse." If viewers are intrigued by this collision of 2 impossible worlds, a heartless billionaire and a struggling delivery girl connected by a deadly secret, make sure to hit that subscribe button now. Because what happens next will shock you. Something shifted in Marcus's chest, an unfamiliar sensation he couldn't immediately identify. It took him a moment to recognize it as respect. "Someone just tried to kill us both," he said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. "Whatever secret you're protecting, it's going to get you killed." "Maybe." She pulled the blanket tighter. "But some secrets are worth dying for." He studied her, this impossible woman with her grandmother's face and her grandfather's stubbornness, if his theory was correct. The birthmark, the bone structure, the defiant tilt of her chin. She had to be connected to the Sterling family somehow, which meant she was connected to his father's unsolved murder and the corporate conspiracy that had haunted him for 30 years. "Stay here tonight," he said finally. "One night. Let me protect you until we figure out who's trying to kill us. Tomorrow, you can walk away if you want. And if I don't want to stay, then you'll probably be dead by morning." He gestured toward the shattered window. "Those weren't amateurs. That was a professional hit, and they missed. They won't miss twice. Emma's composure finally cracked, just slightly. He watched her process the reality of her situation, the danger, the impossibility, the strange man offering her shelter in his tower of glass and steel. "Fine," she whispered. One night turned into 3 as Marcus's security team worked to identify the threat. Emma refused to stay idle, insisting on helping despite his protests that she was a guest, not a servant. On the second morning, he found her in his industrial kitchen at 6 a.m., cooking breakfast like she owned the place. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Making pancakes." She didn't look up from the griddle. "I figured your staff doesn't come in until 7, and I was hungry. Want some? I have a personal chef who prepares my meals." "Great for you. I prefer cooking my own food." She flipped a pancake with expert precision. "Besides, your refrigerator is criminally underutilized. You have ingredients for a 5-star meal and nothing but protein shakes and sparkling water." Marcus found himself sitting at his own breakfast bar for the first time in years, eating pancakes made by a delivery girl while wearing his $3,000 pajamas. They were, annoyingly, the best pancakes he'd ever tasted. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked. "Foster homes." She shrugged, sliding more pancakes onto his plate without asking. "Good cooking was survival. If I made myself useful, families kept me longer. Learned that lesson early in Ohio, perfected it in Pennsylvania, mastered it in New York." The casual way she described her childhood made his chest tighten. His own childhood had been privileged but cold, a mother consumed by grief over his father's murder, a succession of nannies and boarding schools from Connecticut to Massachusetts, the gradual hardening of his heart into the weapon that had built his empire. "I was passed around too," he said quietly, surprising himself. "Different kind of system, boarding schools, summer programs, anywhere my mother didn't have to see me and remember my father." Emma finally looked at him, really looked at him, and he felt exposed in a way no business rival had ever achieved. That must have been lonely. Loneliness builds character. The words were automatic, a deflection he'd used for decades. "No," she said softly. "Loneliness builds walls. Character is what happens when you're brave enough to tear them down." The investigation progressed slowly, revealing layers of conspiracy that stretched back decades. The assassins had been hired through a shell company connected to Sterling Industries' oldest rival, Hartwell Enterprises, run by the ruthless Victor Hartwell, a man who had competed with Marcus's father before his death and had spent 30 years trying to destroy what remained of the Sterling legacy. Hartwell. Emma's face went pale when Marcus revealed the connection. "That's impossible. You know him." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, with trembling hands, she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn photograph, a young couple smiling at the camera, the woman unmistakably the same face from Marcus's mother's picture. "These are my grandparents," she said. "My grandmother died before I was born. My mother never spoke about her, and then my mother died when I was 6 in a car accident outside Pittsburgh. I've spent my whole life trying to find out who they were, where I came from." She pointed to the men in the photo. "I only recently discovered his name. James Hartwell. Victor Hartwell's younger brother." Marcus felt the pieces clicking together like a lock finally finding its key. His father and James Hartwell had been business partners before the murder. They'd been working on something secret, something valuable enough to kill for. And somehow, this woman was the living connection to that buried truth. "We're linked," he breathed. "Our families. Whatever happened 30 years ago got them both killed," Emma finished. "And someone wants to make sure the truth stays buried, even if it means killing us too." Now things get really interesting. If you're as hooked on this mystery as I am, drop a comment below with your theories about what really happened 30 years ago. And don't forget to like this video if you want more stories like this. Victor Hartwell was not a man who left loose ends. At 73, he had spent 5 decades building Hartwell Enterprises into a global conglomerate worth $60 billion, surpassing even Sterling Industries. He had buried secrets, destroyed rivals, and eliminated threats with the cold efficiency of a surgeon. The Sterling boy had been a thorn in his side for years, but manageable. The appearance of James's granddaughter, however, changed everything. "The girl has the files," his security chief reported. We believe her mother hid them before she died, passed them down without explaining what they were. And she doesn't know what she has. Unknown. But she's been digging into her family history for months. It's only a matter of time before she finds them. Victor steepled his fingers, considering. And if she finds them? Then the world learns that you murdered Robert Sterling and framed your own brother for the crime. James went to prison believing he was protecting his family by staying silent. He died there, Mr. Hartwell. If the truth comes out. I know what happens if the truth comes out. Victor's voice was ice. Handle it. Both of them. Make it look like an accident. But Marcus Sterling had survived 30 years of corporate warfare by being 3 steps ahead of his enemies. His security team had intercepted Hartwell's communications, and he knew the attack was coming before Victor's assassins even left the building. We need to move, he told Emma, grabbing her hand. Now. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. He pulled her toward his private elevator. Somewhere we can figure out what your grandmother left you. They fled Manhattan in his private helicopter, landing at a remote estate in Vermont that wasn't listed under his name or any of his companies, a precaution he'd taken years ago for exactly this scenario. The house was modest by his standards, only 8 bedrooms, nestled in woods so thick that satellites couldn't penetrate the canopy. This is your idea of a safe house? Emma asked, looking around at the rustic luxury. What were you expecting? A bunker. I don't know. Something less romantic. She gestured at the stone fireplace, the cozy furniture, the snow beginning to fall outside the windows. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. It's the only property I have that's completely untraceable. Right. She smirked, and for a moment, the fear and exhaustion in her eyes gave way to mischief. The Heartless Billionaire has a secret cabin in the woods. That's not suspicious at all. I'm not heartless, he said, then stopped, surprised by his own defensiveness. 30 years of tabloid headlines would disagree. She started exploring the kitchen, opening cabinets like she already owned the place. Let's see. Billionaire Sterling refuses charity gala, donates to museum instead. Sterling Industries slashes jobs while CEO buys third yacht. Sources say Marcus Sterling has never had a relationship lasting more than 2 weeks. You've done your research. I read gossip magazines when I'm bored during deliveries. She found coffee and began brewing a pot. Also, I was curious about the man who owns the penthouse I almost died in. And what did your research tell you? She turned to face him, leaning against the counter with an expression he couldn't read. That you're either the monster they say you are, or you're very good at pretending to be one. What do you think? I think. She held his gaze, and something electric passed between them. I think monsters don't make sure delivery girls get blankets and hot tea after assassination attempts. Monsters don't eat pancakes and share childhood trauma. Monsters don't fly women to Vermont safe houses that look like pages from a romance novel. Maybe I'm playing a long game. Maybe. She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Or maybe the Heartless Billionaire isn't as heartless as he wants the world to believe. The truth, Marcus was beginning to realize, was far more complicated than that. Over the following days, they worked together to unravel the mystery of their family's intertwined past. Emma's grandmother had been Elizabeth Sterling, Robert Sterling's sister, who had fallen in love with James Hartwell despite the fierce rivalry between their families. Their secret marriage had been discovered by Victor, who saw an opportunity to destroy both his competitors. He murdered my father and framed your grandfather, Marcus said, reading through the documents Emma had finally retrieved from a safety deposit box her mother had left her, documents she'd never thought to open, assuming they were just old photographs. James took the fall to protect Elizabeth and their unborn child, your mother. But why stay silent? Emma's voice cracked. He spent 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He died there. Why not tell the truth? Because Victor threatened Elizabeth. He told James that if he ever revealed what really happened, he would kill her and the baby. Marcus's hands shook with rage. Your grandfather sacrificed everything to protect your family. The weight of this revelation settled over them both. 2 families, destroyed by one man's greed and cruelty. 2 orphans, raised in loneliness and shadow, finally discovering the truth that bound them together. "What do we do now?" Emma whispered. "We take him down." Marcus's voice was steel. "We expose everything. We make sure your grandfather's sacrifice wasn't for nothing." But as he looked at her, this woman who had crashed into his life with spilled pasta and stubborn courage, he realized he wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting for something far more terrifying. He was fighting for the chance to feel something again. If this story is making your heart race, you're not alone. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that love can bloom in the most unexpected places. And stay tuned, because the biggest revelation is still coming. The confrontation with Victor Hartwell happened at his annual charity gala at the Metropolitan Club, an ironic venue for exposing a murderer, but Marcus had always appreciated theatrical justice. They'd spent weeks preparing, gathering evidence, coordinating with federal authorities who were very interested in 30-year-old cold cases suddenly solved. Emma wore a midnight blue gown that Marcus had insisted on buying for her despite her protests. "I can't go to a billionaire's party in a delivery uniform," he'd argued. "Besides, I owe you for the dry cleaning after you saved my life." "I didn't save your life. I got tackled while holding fettuccine." Details. He'd handed her the dress box with something that might have been a smile. "Consider it combat gear." Now, watching her descend the staircase of the Hartwell mansion, Marcus felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling completely. She was luminous, radiant, and completely unaware of her own beauty, which somehow made her more beautiful. "Stop staring," she murmured as she took his arm. "People will think you actually like me." "Would that be so terrible?" She missed a step, catching herself against him. "You're joking." "I never joke." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "I may, occasionally, engage in light sarcasm." Marcus Sterling, engaging in light sarcasm about his feelings. She pressed her hand against her chest in mock shock. The tabloids would never believe it. Then let's give them something else to write about. Before she could respond, Victor Hartwell himself approached them, his smile sharp as a blade. "Marcus. What an unexpected pleasure." "Victor." Marcus's voice was cordial ice. "I don't believe you've met my companion. This is Emma Collins." Victor's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly as he took in Emma's face. "Charmed," he said, but his grip on his champagne glass tightened. "Have we met before?" "You look remarkably familiar." "I have one of those faces," Emma said sweetly. "Must remind you of someone." "Perhaps." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, do enjoy the party." As he walked away, Emma released the breath she'd been holding. "He knows. Of course he knows. He's been trying to kill us for weeks." Marcus guided her toward the center of the ballroom. "But he doesn't know what we know, or what's about to happen." At precisely 9 p.m., the ballroom's massive screens, intended to show Victor's charitable contributions, flickered and changed. Suddenly, documents filled every display. Photographs. Bank records. Testimony from witnesses long assumed silenced. The crowd gasped as the truth of Robert Sterling's murder unfolded before their eyes. Victor's face went white, then red with rage. He tried to signal his security, but they were already being detained by FBI agents who had slipped in among the guests. "Victor Hartwell," Agent Morrison announced, stepping forward with handcuffs, "you're under arrest for the murder of Robert Sterling, conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder of Marcus Sterling and Emma Collins." The room erupted in chaos, but Marcus barely noticed. He was watching Emma, watching the tears stream down her face as decades of injustice finally met justice. "It's over," she breathed. "It's really over." "Not quite." He took her hands in his. "There's still one more truth that needs to be said." "Marcus. I've spent 30 years building walls," he said, his voice carrying despite the chaos around them. "I've spent 30 years convincing myself that I didn't need anyone, that vulnerability was weakness, that the only way to survive was to become as cold and hard as the world that hurt me. You don't have to. Let me finish. Please." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. "You crashed into my life with takeout and stubbornness, and somehow, in the space of weeks, you've dismantled everything I thought I knew about myself. You've shown me that strength isn't about walls, it's about having the courage to let someone see behind them. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that for the first time in 30 years, I don't want to be alone. I'm saying that when I imagine my future, you're in it. I'm saying, he took a deep breath. I'm saying I love you, Emma. Inexplicably, impossibly, completely. She laughed through her tears. That's a lot of adverbs for someone who claims to hate sentiment. I'm branching out. He pulled her closer. Is that a yes? You haven't asked a question. Right. He dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of the chaotic ballroom, surrounded by federal agents and scandalized socialites. Emma Collins. Will you marry me? The room, already frozen by the evening's revelations, fell completely silent. Emma looked down at this man, this heartless billionaire who had somehow become the softest person she'd ever known. This man who ate her pancakes and shared his trauma and flew her to Vermont in the snow. This man who had helped her discover her family's truth and fought beside her for justice. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, laughing, yes, you ridiculous, wonderful, dramatic man. Yes. He swept her into his arms and kissed her, and somewhere in the chaos, someone started clapping. Then more people joined in, and the applause swelled until it drowned out even the sound of Victor Hartwell's protests as he was led away in handcuffs. The wedding happened 3 months later, in the Vermont cabin where they'd first begun to fall in love. Emma wore her grandmother's restored wedding dress, a gesture that made them both cry, and Marcus wore a suit that cost less than his watch, at her insistence. I married a delivery girl, he reminded her during their vows. I think I can handle a reasonably priced suit. Former delivery girl, she corrected. Now I'm the CEO of the Sterling Foundation, dedicated to supporting foster children and wrongly convicted individuals. Using your husband's money. Using our money. We're married now. It's all community property. He laughed, a real laugh, one that made the guests gasp because Marcus Sterling did not laugh in public, and kissed her soundly. I spent 30 years alone, he said, holding her close as the snow fell gently outside the windows. I thought that was strength. I thought that was safety. But I was wrong. About being alone. About everything. He touched her face like she was something precious. You taught me that the strongest thing a person can do is let themselves be loved. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. You taught me that walls don't protect you, they imprison you. Emma smiled, that radiant smile that still made his heart stutter after months of seeing it. You taught me things too. Like what? Like the fact that billionaires are apparently incapable of making their own breakfast. She kissed his cheek. Like the fact that the coldest exterior can hide the warmest heart. Like the fact that family isn't about blood, it's about the people who choose you, fight for you, love you even when you're difficult. I'm never difficult. You reorganized my spice rack alphabetically. While I was sleeping. It was chaos. It was organized by frequency of use, which is far more practical. That's not, he stopped, seeing her grin. You're winding me up. I'm always winding you up. It's my favorite hobby. He pulled her into another kiss, this one longer, deeper. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I love you too. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Now let's go celebrate. Our guests are waiting. Let them wait. Marcus. Emma. He mimicked her tone perfectly. We have the rest of our lives to make appearances. Right now, I just want 5 more minutes with my wife. She melted against him, and the 5 minutes stretched to 10, then 20. No one complained. Everyone who knew them understood that this love had been 30 years in the making, 2 broken people finally finding wholeness in each other. That night, as fireworks lit up the Vermont sky and guests danced in the great room, Marcus and Emma stood on the balcony, watching the snow fall like a blessing. Do you believe in fate? She asked. I believe a delivery girl showed up at my door on the exact night someone tried to kill me, he said. I believe she turned out to be connected to the greatest mystery of my life. I believe that out of all the penthouses in Manhattan, she got sent to mine. He kissed her forehead. Call it fate, call it coincidence, call it the universe having a very specific sense of humor. But I'll believe in it forever. The heartless billionaire, she teased, believing in fate. What would the tabloids say? Probably something like, heartless billionaire single for 30 years falls for clumsy delivery girl, makes her his wife. Emma laughed. That's a terrible headline. It's a perfect headline, he corrected. Because it's true. And it was. The heartless billionaire who had closed himself off from the world found love in the most unexpected place, in spilled pasta and stubborn courage, in shared breakdowns and whispered truths, in the impossible miracle of two wounded souls recognizing each other. Years later, when their children asked how they met, they would tell the story, the assassination attempt, the mystery, the conspiracy, the chase. But the part they always emphasized was simpler: they found each other. In a world that tried to keep them apart, they chose connection over isolation, love over fear, vulnerability over walls. And in doing so, they discovered the greatest truth of all, that even the most broken heart can learn to beat again, if only it's brave enough to try. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in love and justice and the power of human connection, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Every like helps us reach more people with stories that matter. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for love, never too late for truth, never too late to let someone see behind your walls. Because that's the real message of Marcus and Emma's story: walls don't protect us. They only delay the love that's waiting on the other side. And love, as it turns out, is always worth the wait.